out of water, out of when we have water bottles.
Prime Minister and the Liberals face some of their biggest challenges yet, as you just saw, including the deeply complex challenge of foreign interference. But the number one issue weighing on Canadians is far more simple. Many say life has become unaffordable. The Prime Minister is here live in studio. Prime Minister, thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.
It's always a pleasure to be here, David.
I'd like to start, if I could, with the issue of foreign interference. And you and some of your other ministers have expressed doubt in the findings in the recent NSI COP report. But a year ago, when you were resisting calls to call a public inquiry, you reassured Canadians that NSI COP was fit for this kind of task and they could trust its findings. Is it responsible to say it's wrong without saying specifically where it's wrong?
Well, first, specifically, I will always support the work that NSI COP does. That's why we created a National Security and Intelligence Committee of parliamentarians. We needed a way for parliamentarians of all different parties to get the necessary security clearances to be able to look at everything our intelligence agencies are doing. And that's something that Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives campaigned against and resisted for years. This is an important piece of all the different pieces we've done since 2015 to take foreign interference seriously and to make sure that whether it's new bodies, whether it's reports or inquiries, that people have the tools to take it fully seriously.
But this report expresses frustration with a lack of action. It draws some pretty firm conclusions of what parliamentarians, we don't know if they're current, former, recent, or existing, have done. And you say you draw a different interpretation. How do Canadians reconcile that?
Well, I think a perfect example of that is the fact that, two thoughtful parliamentarians, leaders of political parties, Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May, both read the fully classified report and drew very different conclusions.
It's funny how that's the most credit he's ever given them, and it's only when they're in favor of what he's talking about.
No, he's actually saying that the point is that they both read it and came to different conclusions, and just was saying that we're kind of waiting for whatever that lady, her name is, who's in charge of it, is going to finish doing her report on it, and she can decide what the course of action should be. I think that's their argument right now. But yeah, he's not saying that because both of them didn't really agree with him. Jagmeet Singh said that there's something to be concerned about, and Elizabeth May said there wasn't. So he was just saying that even though you had two people read the exact same report, you can still have people coming away with different conclusions.
What was in the report? I think what that emphasizes is the interpretation of evidence, of intelligence, of what we have to do is a really challenging thing, which is part of why it's so surprising that Mr. Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, is choosing to not read the classified report, not get the security cleared so he can actually engage on a substantive, fact-based approach on the issue of foreign interference that everyone needs to take seriously.
But we have this report. It's an all-party report, including some senators. So this is a nonpartisan report from a committee chaired by a Liberal MP. Who should Canadians believe? That committee's interpretation or your interpretation as the leader of the government that's been criticized?
Well, actually, I'd say it is a piece that people can look to, but the fact that the foreign interference inquiry announced actually just today that they are going to be looking into the conclusions of the NSI COP report and drawing further suggestions or steps or engaging with it can actually reassure people that they don't have to take my word for it or Jagmeet Singh's word for it or Elizabeth May or Pierre Poilievre's if he ever chooses to read the report, that we have an independent, thoughtful body weighing in the way we are choosing to deal with foreign interference in a thoughtful way.
But can Justice Ogg reveal any more details than you can, than NSI COP can, than the other ministers who have read this can? She's going to be bound by the same laws here in terms of explicitly spelling out to Canadians what the issues are.
Well, I think everyone understands that when you talk about issues of national security, disclosing classified information.
There's a point in this where he just starts rambling, and you can tell David Cochrane's getting so irritated because he's like not really answering the question. He's just wasting time. They probably got like a really, huh?
He always does that.
Yeah, I know. It's because he knows that there's limited. It's a 25-minute interview, and it's probably like a hard cutoff.
The people who collected that information at risk, puts a knowledge of how we protect Canadians in the hands of those people who want to harm Canadians. There's always, when it comes to national security, a need to balance what we can say publicly with what we actually do to keep Canadians safe. But we have never shied away from transparency. When I stood up in the House of Commons last September to declare that we concluded that India had been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, that was extraordinarily serious, but that was something that Canadians needed to know.
I would actually give him a little bit of credit for that. Like, that was something that he came out with right off the bat. And like,
Arguably,
he didn't necessarily have to. I'm not saying he deserves a ton of credit for it, but he's just like, to make that point that, yeah, like, we have in the past had really sensitive stuff, and where I'm able to, I still will release it to the public. It's just we've had, with this thing, it's different, I guess, right? Also,
I guess it just sounds like, I don't know, it just sounds so wormy when he says it. Like, I don't know.
yeah, no, I agree.
No,
Sounds like he's
directly,
squirming
and
out
I
of the
chose
question.
And also, does this
to do that
does
because
David Cochrane
we
kind of look
needed
like
to
this
make
guy?
sure
Just 1 second.
that
I'm gonna wait till he's on the
Canadians
screen.
understand the threats to Canada and everything we're doing to keep them safe.
So on that moment, you did
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I get not fully, like a
No.
little bit, yeah, but
He just reminds me of him, the principal from Eastbound and Down.
rise in Parliament,
Yeah,
used your
sure.
privilege, your parliamentary privilege, to say these things about India in terms of what you.
I didn't use my parliamentary privilege to do that. I informed the House of things that I would also and did say outside the House as well. It's not like I'm trying to
No, fair
do that.
enough,
That's
fair enough. But why not do something similar now? Because as you say, we saw Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May read the report, and their levels of alarm varied and changed over the course of a period of days. But there is this inference, certainly from Mr. Singh, that he feels the existing MPs may be compromised still. Elizabeth May said she was reassured that nobody in the House of Commons right now can be considered a traitor to Canada. Jagmeet Singh is less convinced of that. Don't you as Prime Minister kind of owe it to the country to clear up exactly how compromised the Parliament may or may not be at this point in time?
But that's exactly why we called a public inquiry with a reputable, independent judge to weigh in exactly on these questions of how to reassure Canadians that everything necessary is being done to keep them safe and to defend our democracy, our institutions from those who attempt to interfere in it, including hostile and foreign state actors, while at the same time informing Canadians of what they can be informed about without compromising our ability to continue to keep Canadians safe.
But there is this inference out there, Prime Minister, that there are people in the House of Commons who have been compromised by a foreign state. And there is no clear way to get clarity and certainty on that at this point in time.
I just laid out that the Foreign
No,
Inquiry
you didn't.
Commission has agreed today, and they announced it, that they're going to be weighing.
I appreciate that, like, I don't know. I think CBC deserves a little more credit, because this is not a softball interview. The whole time, it's all questions that are making him squirm. And like I was saying, that I would like to see Poilievre kind of come forward and do an interview like this. I feel like he doesn't do stuff like that. He only goes onto platforms that are going to be really gentle with him. Like, they're all.
I don't think so.
Have you
I
seen
just
him on
think they're
anything?
afraid to take him on, honestly.
Sorry?
Like, I think they're just kind of like, he's not afraid to get very like in their face, and I think a lot of journalists are kind of like not afraid. It's just like they're not good in those kind of confrontations, so they don't want to interview him.
CBC would this show would interview Poilievre 100%. They deny every single time they send an invitation to them. They have to make a little disclaimer every time. They say, we invited somebody from the Conservative Party to come, but as usual, they denied a request.
You know, and that
And like, there's no way this guy's going to turn down an interview with the incoming potential future prime minister. Like, no way.
is a very clear way to give answers to Canadians on what can be shared, what level of alarm people should have on this.
But individual MPs who may be compromised is what I'm speaking about. Are you suggesting that it's your understanding the inquiry will be able to say this particular member of Parliament has been compromised by a foreign state?
The inquiry will do the work that is necessary to ensure that our democracy is kept safe and that the right processes are followed. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to find one way or another in terms of naming names. I think there are very real reasons why we should be trusting a semi-judicial process and an independent
He's
person
kinda
who is
right.
not
I kind of
of any
agree.
political bias to be able to say, look, this is how
It's a
thoughtful
committee of, like,
country
members of all the
and
parties that are supposed to review
democracy
it.
should go about dealing with these very real threats to it.
But is it tenable to just go on without names attached to some of these allegations? I mean, Jagmeet Singh has said that there's nobody in his caucus he needs to worry about. Can you say the same thing with comfort and clarity?
I hadn't known that Jagmeet said that. I would be wary of any party leader drawing any sort of conclusion like that.
Including Mr. Singh?
I would be wary of any party leader drawing any conclusion like that. There is a range
He seems so upset.
of issues
Yeah,
around
it's
foreign
funny that he wouldn't have
interference
watched that
that
statement.
that our security agencies,
I don't
that
know.
our various institutions are engaged in.
busy.
We know that foreign actors are trying to interfere in all different parties in many different ways, and protecting the integrity of our parliamentary system and of people who choose to step forward in Parliament from false or misleading accusations that may well be the goal of some of those countries wishing to interfere, is requiring a level of thoughtfulness that is not always conducive to selling newspapers or headlines, but is what a responsible government must do to continue to engage in foreign interference. And I'll remind you, we are the government that has brought in more measures, more
I
structures.
hate this talking point. They don't get any credit for being the first people to do it. It's the first administration that's ever really had to deal with this on a large scale. It's so stupid.
More ways to deal with foreign interference than any other, because no other government ever did anything on that.
A lot of people will look at those last two answers and suggest that you are implying there's something to be suspicious about with the New Democrats, right? And their caucus. And this is the whole challenge with this issue, right?
I am implying that interference
Oh,
in our
jeez.
parliamentarians goes beyond party lines from many different sources, and we need to make sure that before we go accusing anyone from any
He's
party
so
on
bad at,
anything,
like,
there are really important
sounding
processes
like a
to go through.
robot.
The Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, talked about the fact that
I just feel like it would come off so
intelligence
much different
is
if he just came, like,
putting
talked
together
normally.
pieces of a puzzle. And if you see a single puzzle piece, you may jump to a conclusion that doesn't hold up a few weeks later. And if you took actions on that particular puzzle piece that turns out to be wrong, you can do significant damage to our democracy and to our institutions. And that's why we have to be very, very responsible and careful about it,
I
which
don't
is
know why he couldn't have said
exactly
that
why
at the
it's
start.
a good thing that the inquiry into foreign interference will
Like,
be
that's the actual
looking
good
at this.
point, is that, yeah, you don't want to end up in a situation where you're prosecuting someone who ends up, you get more context and it turns out that it's not actually the way it looked like. He said this type of intelligence is, like, complicated, right? And I don't know. Yeah, like, he goes, like, around this whole rigmarole to avoid the question when he could just say that.
Report and making conclusions and perhaps recommendations to us on the way to move forward.
Mr. Singh was on the show on Friday, and he said after he read the top secret report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, he came away convinced that you had enough information and should have acted on the issue of Han Dong and the nomination of Don Valley North. He's now sitting as an independent. He removed himself from his caucus, and
Yeah,
his
that whole
future
thing
is
is
in doubt.
super crazy. That,
Do you
I
think
know,
he should have
international
acted? Is he
students as well,
done now,
they
Han
busted
Dong, as a
him
member
there
of your
and-
caucus?
These
for
are-
good?
Yeah.
No, yeah, he's right though. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm happy he's asking him these questions, right? Look how upset he is.
These are issues that were covered extensively as part of the foreign interference inquiry. And NSICOP has its own processes that it goes through. But I engaged directly with those issues, talked very much about what was known at the time. And that's one of the things that is really important in any intelligence gathering process, understanding what was known in one particular moment in time and not trying to apply hindsight or what we know in a different situation to what could have been done in that place. And I think there's been a bit of a blending of those issues, but I'm not going to get into specific cases here.
It just he said that based on what he's read, that Mr. Dong should not be allowed back in your caucus and should not be allowed to run again as a Liberal.
Like I
Do
said,
you
I'm
agree?
not going to get into specific cases here.
Okay, tomorrow is the one-year anniversary of the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. You mentioned what you did in Parliament last September. You spoke with Prime Minister Modi at the G7 over this weekend. Has there been an improvement in that relationship?
Just
Is
gotta do a
Modi
stretch
and his
for a
government
second.
cooperating now? And how is this encounter different than your last?
Well, I think one of the really good things about summits is you get an opportunity to engage directly with a huge range of different leaders with whom there are various issues. And certainly with India,
I don't know how much he
there
loves
are
summits.
massive people-to-people ties. There
I know.
are really important economic
loves the
ties.
summits and
There's
conferences.
alignment on a number of big issues that we need to work on as democracies, as a
That's
global
one thing that's
community.
like really weird for me is to
But
imagine
now that he's through
Poilievre
his
going
election,
to stuff like
I
that.
think
I just
there
can't.
is an
He doesn't
opportunity for us to engage,
I don't know.
including on some very serious issues around national security and keeping Canadians safe, and the rule of law that
You know,
that
he's
we
52.
will be engaging in.
Have you seen improvement in cooperation? I know investigators were concerned, and I know you don't direct the police on this, but have you gotten any sense of whether things have improved in the past little while?
There is work ongoing very much.
I want to switch, if I can, to the tax issue that your government has been pushing, the change in the capital gains inclusion rate, and you've argued that it will really only affect the truly wealthy. I think it's fair to say that one sector, though, that will be particularly affected by this is the tech sector because of the way they compensate their staff and build their companies. You said you want Canada to be a tech hub, particularly in artificial intelligence. Given the way tech companies function in their employees, does this not work against your economic goals there?
No, it doesn't, because at the same time we're creating more incentives and more supports for startups and tech companies to continue to do the groundbreaking advances in artificial intelligence, quantum robotics,
Oh my
all the
God,
different
just
things
get
that
to the
Canada is one of
point.
the
Holy.
world leaders on.
He's such a rambler.
The choice we made to ask those who are making a lot of money, with the capital gains affects individuals when they're making more than $250,000 in a given year from the sale of investments that they've made. That is
love how he
not
focuses
the
on the investments
vast
part of that.
majority of Canadians. And what we're doing with that money is putting it towards
Yeah, that's obviously
making
not
sure
what people are
specifically
concerned
that
about.
young people who are seeing the dreams of home ownership or prices rise on groceries and on so many different things, we're able to actually invest more to support them, because the system is not getting more fair, and we're trying to make sure that it's fair for every generation.
But if a tech company that wants to get into artificial intelligence is starting from the ground up, these are not existing companies really at scale in our economy at this point in time, they will go where the tax opportunities are more favorable, will they not? Do you not create a disincentive for them to come to Canada based on this new structure?
If someone's only going on where they can
nice
make
mugs.
the most profits in the world, they'll go to a zero tax location somewhere on an island somewhere. But if they want to actually build a company that has a world-class talent pool to draw from, a place that offers extraordinary supports and competitive opportunities and quality of life for everyone, for all their workers and their executives, they come to Canada. And that's what we've seen over the past years as more and more companies are investing in Canada. Last year, we were
so
the
now's
third
the time
largest
to
country
put
in
a
the
fucking
world in
capital
terms of
gains
total
tax in.
foreign direct investment, because companies, including in the tech sector, are choosing to come and invest in Canada. And this making sure that young people have a fairer chance is not going to dissuade people. On the contrary, it's the kind of thing that makes for more stable and fairer societies that people want to be part of.
On the people who claim a capital gains in excess of $250,000 on an annual basis, I'm sure your math is right on that. That is a very small percentage of the population, but there have been a lot of concerns made by people who are self-employed or they work in the private sector and they've made investments in rental properties and other real estate and other assets that they intended to sell for their retirement. And I know there's a change in the lifetime capital gains exemption that is designed to shelter against that when in particular it's a family business. But there are a lot of people who still believe and have done the math that they are going to be worse off with this, that they've planned for retirement and this changes the game on them.
I think there's a lot of people who are going to be affected by this, who are extremely wealthy, who see this as something that is going to make a material difference in them.
Focus on the
because
wealthy
they're making
people.
Such,
They're the problem.
such a
Well, that's
significant amount
that's
of
the
money,
focus, right? That's
who
the
are
whole
try-
reason they even brought this in right now, is so they could drive this wedge issue with Poilievre, because they thought, I guess the way they were seeing it is they were going to be like, oh, this is a tax that's only going to affect super wealthy people that we can get Polyev to say no on, and everybody's just going to rally to our side because they're going to be, oh yeah, tax the wealthy. That's, I don't know. It's such a bad, like, I don't know who does their, like, when they like crowd test for things to like see if it's a popular policy. Like, there's 2 new taxes that you're putting in right before an election. It's like real genius move.
Trying to convince everyone else that there's a lot more people who are going to be affected by this than not. My challenge, and I've spoken with MPs with this, and I've spoken with a number of people, that when people actually do the math and see what is actually this is going to cost them, they will see that it is hard to hold an argument when we have young people who, this generation, unlike just 20 years ago, can't even imagine buying a home right now, can't get into the housing market, can't see the kinds of opportunities that previous generations had. I understand that people who've made very, very well in their life don't want to get a little less in the way of profits. But this is a fundamental choice around a fairer society and a fairer community and a fairer economy.
Like, I just hate how he takes so long to say things, and it's like, just say it quickly, be brief, and then I understand it's because he wants to avoid the questions later on, but it's like, people are going to clip you regardless. Why not make something clippable that you would actually want to see posted? Like, it's so dumb. Everything he says takes like 20 minutes.
Making sure that we can invest in the most ambitious housing plan this country has ever seen to respond to the pressures around density, around public lands, around all the different things, that support for renters, protections of renters. These are things that are making a huge difference, that are being paid for by asking the wealthiest who've done really well to pay a little bit more, or not even pay more, to make a little less in profits when they sell profitable investments. And that's something that the fact that the Conservatives are choosing, who talk about affordability every day in the House, but suddenly say, oh yeah, no, but we don't want to ask those who've done really well in this economy to make a little less so that those who are struggling can do better. Is I think untenable.
Okay, so it's about a $20 billion revenue take from the capital gains inclusion increase over the next 4 or 5 years, if I remember it correctly. The housing plan that you talked about, we've got the first steps on pharmacare. There's the dental rollout. There's still a deficit on the books of between $40 and $50 billion. You've made commitments to NATO. The expectation is there'll be further commitments to NATO. This is tens of billions of dollars. Beyond this, can Canada live up to all of the commitments you're making as a government without the expectation of some sort of broad-based tax increase for everyone to pay for these things? Because the deficits are there and the future cost obligations are still there.
Canada has the best balance sheet in the G7 right now. We have the lowest deficit. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio. We're the 3rd largest AAA economy in the world with a better outlook than the United States. We have one of the best fiscal balance sheets of any of our peer countries. And our choice, as we're seeing inflation come down, because we have been responsible to drive inflation down, and the Bank of Canada is responding with moving interest rates in the right direction, we've made the choice to take that strong balance sheet and invest in Canadians who are hurting right now because of high prices.
I don't know how he doesn't
because of
understand that
challenges
what he's
around
saying right now is
affordability.
fucking
So
jibber jabber
our
to the
decision
majority of people.
to make sure
Doesn't make
that
any
we're
sense to
investing
them.
in housing for young people, that we're doing this in an extremely ambitious way that challenges municipalities and provinces to step up as well, that we're delivering on dental care. Right now, over 200,000 seniors have had access to dental care in just the past 6 weeks. This is making a huge difference because we all know the cost of dental care has gone up over the past years, and suddenly it's affordable for hundreds of thousands and millions of people still coming on board on that. We're talking about delivering on free insulin, delivering on free contraceptive medications. We've driven childcare costs down to in half across the country, down to $10 a day in many places. And Conservatives have chosen to vote against every single one of those measures and campaign against all those measures every time because they think that cuts are the best way to help Canadians. We know that if we have a strong economy as we do...
He could have literally cut out that whole first section of this and just literally said that. Just said, Conservatives want to cut programs, we want to make them. So we're increasing tax revenue for the government in order to help people who need it. That's all he needs to say. And instead, it's like this fucking huge diatribe that nobody wants to hear.
and Canadians are hurting, the best thing to do is take that strong economy and put it in service of Canadians who need support.
Despite the measures you've just outlined there that you've done to make life more affordable, the cost of many, many things have gone up. And while the inflation crisis may be over, the cost of living crisis is still there. Things are baked in, housing, rent is still too expensive. This has affected the political mood of the country, right? And your party, as the governing party, has suffered from it.
But even when you say baked in, the measures we are delivering are actually ways that are taking pressure off of families' balance sheets.
But groceries are still high. You know,
yes,
things are still
but we're
up,
delivering
right?
a national food program that's going to save $800 a year to lower income families because we're delivering for 400,000 more kids across the country. So there is no one silver bullet. The cost of living is up all around the world. We were all talking about that at the G7, that everyone's facing challenges. But they hear about Canada's $10 a day childcare. They hear about the investments we're making in greater density to push local and regional governments to be investing in more housing, to unlock affordable housing. These are things that we are doing that are going to make a material difference in people's lives. And the big difference, I know you want to go to the political side of things.
Yeah, I do.
The big difference between what Mr. Poilievre is putting forward
It
for
must
young
be like
people
signaling
and
to
what
him.
we
He's
are for all Canadians, he wants to keep Canadians angry. We are focused on solving the challenges they're facing. And that is a very clear contrast that Canadians are seeing.
It's been about a year, though, since Canadians got really angry about this. And you saw the polls diverge because you and the Conservatives were kind of neck and neck. And now it's been a consistent year of leads for Mr. Poilievre and his Conservatives. The parlor game, as you know, is the conversation of why you should quit and when you should leave. And you say you're staying.
Look at his
so
face,
what is
dude.
it you want to do in a
That Canadians are
been a consistent year of leads for Mr. Poilievre and his Conservatives. The parlor game, as you know, is the conversation of why you should quit and when you should leave, and you say you're staying.
Look at his
So
face.
what is it you want to do in a fourth term that you couldn't do in the first three?
Oh no, it's continuing to meet the moment for Canadians. It's continuing to know that what we've
You're not
done
meeting the
over
moment,
the past
though.
years, whether it was
I know,
raising
yeah. I'm
taxes
going to
on the
continue
wealthiest
to
and
do
lowering
the
them for
thing
the
that's
middle
driven
class,
polls down.
whether it was delivering on a Canada Child
my
benefit
God.
that
He's such an idiot.
has lifted hundreds of thousands.
Sorry?
I'm just saying he's such an idiot.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's just
Like,
not
he's
open to
clueless.
criticism at all. That I think that's his biggest issue. Is he's just he
no,
thinks
I
no,
agree.
just stay the
That
course,
makes
keep
him-
doing exactly what I'm doing, and everyone will just see how smart and great I am.
Of kids out of
It
poverty.
makes
and
him
made a huge
seem stupid.
It just it makes him seem like really smug and arrogant. That's the problem. Which is it's fine in certain contexts, but when you're answering something that's coming like directly from the public, like that's a real when he's asking about grocery prices too, and he like just completely dodges the question. It's like, buddy, like these are things that you can actually relate with people over. Like you don't have to say, oh, I'm feeling it too, but you can just say, yeah, this is something I've heard a lot, and we're doing our best, and we at least make some attempt to actually answer the question and be like, oh, well, I'm doing school lunches, and that's basically the exact same thing as answering this question. Like, dude, like you're not listening. You're not even attempting to answer the question.
difference across the country.
Yeah,
Whether
well, that's
it was
the problem, right? Is he's not listening to anybody.
Yep. No, I
don't
agree.
think.
being there to support Canadians during the pandemic and yet still have the fastest bounce back on jobs of any of our peer countries, delivering on childcare, delivering on all the things that are giving those opportunities to young people who, quite frankly, don't feel like they are getting the opportunities they need to have. There is a lot more fighting to do. At the same time, there are incredible opportunities. What we're seeing in terms of drawing in investment in a green economy that is giving opportunities for small towns across the country to suddenly see factories starting up, good manufacturing jobs come back, the way we're seeing economic reconciliation move forward in real ways for Indigenous communities, the way we're seeing the opportunities for young people to actually get back on track in terms of owning a home. There's lots to do on top of the exciting things around AI and quantum and technology that Canada can lead on and around the world.
But despite that optimistic picture, I mean, the country is still angry. You can see it in the mood. And increasingly, Prime Minister, a lot of them are mad at you, right? I know you say you want to beat Pierre Poilievre. You keep coming back to that. But what if you are the reason the Liberals can't beat the
Like, what a banger question. Like, I'm just so happy you asked him this.
Conservatives in the next election? Where do you factor that into your thought process?
I think, first of all, Canadians are not in a decision mode right now.
What?
He's so angry, dude.
Tell a pollster if they ever manage to reach you. is very different
Tell
from
a pollster. He's like taking a swipe at them and their polls.
the choice Canadians end up making in an election campaign. And fundamentally, and it's not just Canada, but everywhere around the world. And
28% Canadians approve of Trudeau, 66% disapprove of him.
With other leaders.
Angus Reid Institute, too.
And in Switzerland at the Peace Conference for Ukraine. Everywhere, people are struggling with high inflation, with cost of living issues, with interest rates, with housing.
You know, like, and that's the thing, too, is I just think he's not a very good leader of a party. I think he could have been a good, like, maybe a foreign affairs minister or something for somebody else, because he is good at, like, being a... He knows how to talk to people in Europe and stuff, right? But he's just not. I feel like he's just so bad at communicating to Canadians.
Housing challenges, with childcare challenges, all these things. We are doing better than many countries. Doesn't make a difference to someone who can't pay for their groceries, but the way people are everywhere facing a certain amount of frustration. And I truly believe that as we choose to step up on solving those challenges, to contrast with a political vision that so far consists from the Conservatives of just making people more angry and saying everything is broken, I know Canadians are pragmatic people who focus on solutions, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing.
I have one last question because I know I've gone over time, but a week from today, it's not going to be a public opinion poll. It's going to be a by-election in Toronto St. Paul's. This is a seat the Liberals have held in its various forms since 1993. It's part of that Fortress Toronto.
This one's happening today. This
helped you in the last 3 federal elections. What does it mean if you don't win that by-election on Monday?
Well, first of all, Carolyn Bennett has been an extraordinary leader in that community for so many years. I'm
the lady stepped down
her as ambassador to Denmark right now, and she's doing a great job. But the legacy there of thoughtful, strong leadership is going to be well carried by Leslie Church. We have, it's an important campaign. People are getting out at the doors. People are working hard. We don't take any corner of the country for granted, no matter what our lead in the polls is, and we're going to work through the finish line on this one.
It feels like a must-win for your party, though. Is it fair to describe it as that?
Every electoral contest is a must-win for any political party, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, David.
More Power and Politics coming up right after this break. The Power panel has been listening in.